Thank you, Ken Corlin. Thank you to Deputy Pringle for sharing time. Minister or Caretaker Minister, I ran and got a copy of the Housing Actions report that you urged us all to read when you spoke. I ran up to the office to print one up and to browse through it. Ironically, it's entitled Laying the Foundations. Now the last thing that was done by this government is laying the foundations of and actually building social and affordable housing, because all of the emphasis has been on acquiring, leasing and RAS, HAP, etc. It's been well debated already in this chamber. Now, in the first page, you outline 5 key things that you did, and of course, number 1 is action to stimulate the private sector to deliver more housing, not to build and give councils money to do it or housing agencies, but to stimulate the private developers. Now, as my colleague Deputy Barry, who spoke earlier, said, the private developers have no interest in providing social housing or affordable housing, and they've gone on strike because the profit isn't big enough, and that's been confirmed by any commentator in the construction scene. Now, the other thing that you urged us to do when you spoke the last day was to have a grown-up conversation about the Constitution. Can I just ask why it took you 5 years to tell us that the Constitution was an impediment? Well, your party has been in government for 5 years. You're there too. And it's only after the election that we hear that the Constitution was to blame all along. Tell us the clauses and why is it only now? I mean, you could have had a referendum instead of the presidential age, which nobody in the country cared about, on these key things, for example. I don't believe that that is the case. There's a lot you could do. Now, since you came in, you said there's been a 10% increase in families exiting homelessness. That's a bit of a laugh, Minister, because all of the figures from last month in January, there was a 148% increase in homelessness, the highest ever in the history of the state, 3 times more than anything that ever happened before. And last month, there was a 36% increase in Dublin. Now, it isn't just Dublin. Obviously, Galway and Cork are really starting to feel this as well. But what you're trying to tell us today was that relationship breakdown is responsible for homelessness and is a key factor. That's an absolute joke. I'll tell you what's responsible for homelessness. It is the case that 65% of homeless families are lone parents and 35% are not. Why are they homeless? Not because their relationships have broken down, because they're poorest in society, and you and your government cut the rent supplement and you did nothing about rents. And in this document you have a rent freeze in one of your titles, which you should edit, because there have been no rent freeze, Minister. What you introduced was a 48-month lease, and what the landlords did was just jack up the rents in anticipation of that happening. And everybody knows that. We've all had those people coming to us. Now, the first thing that you should have done today, Minister, was come in and apologise to the people of Ireland for inflicting this misery, and then agreed a declaration of an emergency. Can I just mention the constituency that I represent, because we're at the epicentre of the homeless tsunami that was warned about by Peter McVerry. There's 259 families homeless in Fingal, according to the council meeting last Monday. Most of them, of that 259, well, certainly the vast majority, hail from Dublin West. 40%, according to the Irish Times, of all Dublin families who are homeless come from the constituency that your leader represented for 5 years, and also Minister for Health for Adger. Now, in a meeting I had on Monday with the Fingal Housing Director, she outlined that there would be 14 houses built in Kappa, which isn't in Dublin West, and I see in your document there'll be 22 houses built in Dublin West, despite it having the youngest population in Western Europe and the highest number of homeless people in the country, bar none. What sort of a solution is that to put in front of people? And Minister, the only way that we're going to resolve the housing crisis is to actually give councils money to build houses, like they did when I was growing up and like they did in the past. And can I just finally say, in relation to Tyrrellstown, which thank you for meeting the residents and thank you for inviting your leader to the meeting and not other TDs for the area, but anyway, it's absolutely critical that we agree that this committee that you're setting up looks at the whole issue of acquiring homes that are in distress or that are in the hands of vulture funds. We can't add to the homeless situation that we have. We need to acquire these homes, allow people to stay in them and to buy them, which many of them are more than capable of doing, or to rent them at an affordable rate. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy.